Julian Zelizer, and I am here with Amie Parnes of The Hill to talk about all things politics. Amie, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Julian. Happy holidays.
Thank you to you as well. And I wanted to start. You wrote a really nice piece, moving piece, given what happened about Rob Reiner and why so many Democrats were mourning, and what he had done beyond his movies and TV in terms of the Democratic Party. What are some of the things that he was engaged in over the years?
Well, people think of him as this big Hollywood director, actor, but it's interesting because when this tragedy happened, it didn't take long for people to reach out to me and tell me exactly what they felt about him, and that's because they worked with him in Washington. Washington really felt a profound loss, particularly people in the Democratic Party, because he wasn't just a prolific fundraiser for the Democratic Party, but he shared ideas. I interviewed someone who told me that he was putting together videos and he often pinged Rob Reiner for his opinion to ask him what he thought about things. And he was very generous and kind with his time and offered opinions, offered help. And I heard that across the board from lots of people who, had visited his house at times with various presidents who had, asked him for help, and he generously offered his time. And so I think Washington and a lot of people in Washington were really, really hit hard by this tragedy.
What were some of the issues that he was concerned about and worked on over the years?
Obviously, he was not a big believer in the Trump administration and fought hard for democratic causes. People say, and Michelle Obama said this the other day, he was the real deal. He wasn't just talking the talk; he was really walking the walk. And a lot of people expressed the same sort of sentiment that it wasn't just him attacking Trump on social media. He really, really felt it in his core, and he really felt like the Trump administration was doing a lot of harm, and kind of fought back in his own way. And I think that's why you saw the president have such an inappropriate response to his death the other day.
Do you think, I'm just curious, it's out of the article, but is that going to be less common in coming years? I mean, given the political pressure and corporate pressure that now exists, will celebrities, do you think, still do what Rob Reiner did, or are we going to see less of that?
I think a lot of people are stepping up. Actually, you're seeing a lot more activism. At least in my view, I think I've seen a lot of people talk to me about how they really didn't care about politics before, and this has kind of forced them into the political arena. I think a lot of people will have some reservation because things have become so divisive. But I think because things are actually so divisive, and because a lot of people feel that democracy and worse is sort of on the line, that they will jump in and be an active part of politics.
It's interesting. I was thinking the reaction to this, to President Trump's post after this happened, and the Jimmy Kimmel story in some ways elicited a stronger response than some of the other things. I think it's still part of the power of celebrity and the connection people have. I'm curious on your thoughts of why this triggered a kind of response we don't see with all the things the president does.
He had for Gen Xers like me in particular, people grew up with his movies. I watched all of them dozens of times. I can recite my head. I'm sure you can too, Julian. And so I think it really had a profound impact on a lot of us. I'm very saddened by it all week. And I know a lot of Republicans reached out to me after Trump's remarks, and these are Trump supporters, some of them, and they were really put off by the president's remarks. They felt like it was inappropriate, and, someone called it vile and worse, I think. And so I think that it really had a visceral reaction to a lot of us. Like I said, I'm very saddened by the whole situation, and I feel so much for this family right now.
And turning to the Democratic Party, which you've been writing a lot about Newsom, and I've seen how you've been kind of covering him. There seems to be a lot of growing interest in him, and he's appearing. He was on Ezra Klein's podcast. How do you assess where he is right now in the Democratic Party and his role?
I think someone asked me the other day where I see him and what tier he's in. I think he's in the top tier by himself. Point. Maybe AOC is in there as well with him, but I think he is leading the charge. He is not just talking the talk, as I said earlier, but he's actually, I think Prop 50 helped him in a lot of ways. It boosted him. It showed him as someone who isn't just, talking and fighting back with words. He's actually taking it very seriously. And he can point to that, when he runs. He's had quite a year when you think about it, Julian. I mean, he started the year with the California wildfires and was kind of defense in a lot of ways. And now you see, even before Prop 50, his polling was increasingly rising among Californians. And a lot of people at the time were in my ear saying, I'm not quite a fan of his, but and now I'm hearing from a lot more of them saying, you know what, I've kind of changed my mind on him. Like he might be a little bit artificial. He might be all the things that people say about him, but he's striking a chord. He's really hitting the moment right now. And I think that is sort of why he's in his own tier. At this point, I would say he's the front runner and it's his to lose. And when you think about elections, the front runner has usually been the one, with the exception of 2008, when Barack Obama kind of slid past Hillary Clinton and no one really saw that coming. Front runners pretty much keep their front runner status. And so I very much think that it is his to lose at this point. He has fundraising. He has this amazing email list that he's cultivated over the last few months, particularly with Prop 50. People across the country who have donated, small dollar donors. Think about how valuable that is going into a presidential race. And I think he's already running without running. Of course, he's not going to enter the race until early 2027 is what a lot of people are telling me after he finishes his term as governor. But he's already very much running in a lot of ways.
And what is it that he's done? I mean, the year began, I think what you said was pretty common. That a lot of people thought he was somewhat manufactured. They talked about him being from the epitome of the kind of state that Democrats are kind of smeared with, meaning a coastal state. So what has he done, do you think, that have changed some of those perceptions and put him in this position?
Well, I mean, yes, the wildfires kind of put him on his back. Remember that image of him meeting Trump at the airport, which was kind of an interesting moment. He actually took on Trump face to face, and I think a lot of Democrats like that. But a lot of people blamed him for not taking action and doing that. Fast forward to them, and then he had people like Charlie Kirk on his podcast. That put off a lot of people. Steve Bannon on his podcast, and people kept questioning why are you having these Republicans on? And I talked to him around April, and he told me, look, this is something we need to learn as a party. We need to learn about what the other side did right. We need to, talk to the other side. But then he sort of shifted a little bit and went back and started posting on social media, started mirroring Trump in a lot of ways, becoming his own version of Trump. And I think that was very pleasing to a lot of Democrats. And then that took, the redistricting fight took on a life of its own. As I said, he built this amazing email list. He cultivated all these supporters. And in California, he started turning things around. His poll numbers are up 10% in the last couple of in California. He's way above water at this point, and he wasn't doing so well when the year started. So I think he does have the wind at his back in a lot of ways, but there is still that perception of, an artificial guy, a guy who only cares about, progressive issues. He cares about Hollywood and Silicon Valley, and that's it. And when I've spoken to him also, he's been very proactive at, look, California isn't just the blue state people think it is. There are a lot of red pockets. I represent them too. And I would expect him to sort of highlight that, maybe not in a primary, but if he does make it past the primary, that's going to be the focus of his campaign.
Do you think so far, does he stand for something? Meaning, a lot of great candidates have something they are known for, they're going to fight for, and I'm trying to figure out what that is with him. Do you think he has that yet? That story he wants to tell?
He doesn't have it yet, but as I was talking to Jamal Simmons, the Democratic strategist, the other day, and he said people aren't really interested right now in policy as much as they are in sort of activism. And that's the moment we find ourselves in. What he has to do, I think, is come up with some sort of plan going forward that talks about what he wants to do. It's something Democrats haven't been very good at having this plan, at talking about economic issues in particular. I think if he can kind of home in on an economic plan, if he can take advantage of what he's been doing online, but kind of being more proactive and saying, look, here's what I would do. Here's how I would handle these economic issues. Here's what I did in California. I think that would really serve him.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck in the interview. He didn't with Ezra Klein. He doesn't back away from some of the things that are controversial, whether talking about his state and the costs, and he kind of offered a pretty vigorous defense, or the insurance for everyone. He didn't back away from giving insurance to undocumented. So it seems like there's a kind of principled part of him that can emerge. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yes, for sure, and I think we're gonna see more right now. I think he's been smart about what he's been saying and doing. I think that in the next year, I would expect him to kind of come forward and talk more about, his vision. He talked to me. I brought my son Remy, as you know, to California when I sat for his podcast, and he was telling Remy in this very private moment, he said, "When you run for president, you need to have a why. You need to know, you know." And so he's very, very conscious of and cognizant of the fact that he needs a why he's running. And I thought that moment was kind of interesting for him to be talking to my son about. He's very curious about it.
Right, he might have been part of a historic moment right there. And you also wrote about his relationship with the former Vice President Harris. What is that relationship like? Is there friction? Will it work in his favor? How do you see that?
It's a tricky relationship, Julian, because as in his words, they've been close friends for decades. But there is a lot of tension there. And we saw that tension kind of spill into public view in her book when she called him after Joe Biden dropped out and she was trying to rally support behind her. She calls him pretty much right away to get his support. And he says, he doesn't answer and texts her back and says, I'm hiking, I'll call you later. And she obviously was really, really offended by that slight. She saw it as a slight and put it in her book. When it comes out in her book, he's kind of wondering why she puts that in her book and texts her about it and says, why did you do that? And she writes back and says, I'm out on my book tour. I'll get back to you later, which kind of, in his words, kind of explains the relationship a little bit. I think it's complicated. They not only go back and came up together in San Francisco and California politics, but there is this kind of they share a lot of the same consultants, they share a lot of the same fundraisers, and when a lot of people expect her to jump in, and I think there's going to be a lot of friction between the two of them because obviously I think he's going to run. If she does run, where are the loyalties there? Where do the consultants go? And a lot of people are saying, well, they're smart consultants are obviously going to back the winning horse or what they see as the winning horse, and that being Newsom. They see Harris as a voice of the past. They see him as a voice of the future. But it'll be a little interesting to see the dynamic between the two of them and how that evolves if they both choose to run for president, because they've purposely kind of stayed out of each other's way up until now. You have one be district attorney, one go more of the governor's route. They've purposely stayed out of each other's way, and now they're on course for a bit of a collision. So I'm curious to see how that plays out.
And just to wrap up on Newsom, you've now written books about three presidential campaigns. He is the front runner. I think you're right. Is it a solid kind of front runner status? We see so many front runners that are ephemeral, that don't have a strong foundation. From what you've seen in other elections, does he have the foundation that this might very well continue?
I think he does. I mean, I'm curious to see. There are a lot of people like Wes Moore who are getting attention but have their own races to run. He's running in his own gubernatorial race, so he can't really position himself right now for the presidency or a presidential run. So I'm curious to see how that shakes out. But there are other people like Governor Bashir, and I just wrote a story about him that's coming out probably this weekend. He's an interesting figure that could I think make waves. He has a very, very high approval rating in the state. He's the most popular governor according to Morning Consult, the on the Democratic side, which I think is really interesting. And he has a case to be made. A lot of people see him as kind of like a softer guy, not as vocal, and they see that as kind of a deterrent of his. But I think, as someone told me close to him, don't underestimate him. So there's for other people to kind of bubble up and maybe take front runner status. But I think Governor Newsom at this point is very well positioned in running. He's wanted to run for a while, I think, and he knows what he's doing in terms of eliciting support.
Wait, is Bashir the most popular Democratic governor among Democrats nationally or within his like the state?
I think it's within his state. He has the rating. But I think that's a really interesting kind of thing because he's in a red state. He's the governor of Kentucky. He has found ways to appeal to Republicans, obviously, because you can't win in a state like Kentucky without appealing to Republicans. And if Democrats kind of move in more of a moderate direction, I'm curious to see if that is the kind of candidate they back. But I do think there's a big opening for him to kind of prove that Democrats have lost because they haven't been able to appeal to people, to Republicans. But someone made the point to me yesterday that he's almost a Democrat of the past. He's a Democrat from the '90s, an Al Gore, if you will. And there isn't room for that sort of Democrat right now. And that's sort of where the push pull within the party lies, Julian. As you know, I think there's people are struggling to figure out who the party is and where it goes from here. So TBD, we'll see how that shakes out.
And I mean, I actually wanted to ask that as we move to the last part. But I mean, one thing as fellow Gen Xers, everyone from our generation remembers in 1988 when Governor Dukakis ran against Vice President George H.W. Bush, and Massachusetts itself became part of the focus of the attacks and pretty devastating on Dukakis. So kind of what happens in Kentucky, what happens in California will be really important to their campaigns in the next few months. I mean, that will become part of the metric and the opposition research that people should focus on. Anyway, the last thing I wanted to ask you, since you brought it up, the last area was the Democrats in general. When the year began, Democrats were clearly demoralized. Ratings were terrible, and a sense of what happens next. 2025 is almost over. Where are the Democrats today?
That's a really interesting question. I'm writing a story about that right now. I think that it's a question because I think in some ways they have proven that they can be victorious. They had two big wins in New Jersey and Virginia. They won the mayoral race in Miami, a seat they haven't had in 3 decades. So there have been wins. You have the DNC not wanting to release their autopsy, which I think is kind of interesting because a lot of Democrats have been thirsty for knowledge about what happened and where to go from here. Um, so I think they are doing well, but I think they're kind of fooling themselves in a way. They need to know what happened in order to rebuild. And they're rebuilding, but kind of doing it blindly. And I think Democrats still talk to me about how there is no message behind what the party stands for. People don't know what the party stands for. And these are people who really want Democrats to win. And so I think they need to, in the next year, obviously heading into the midterms, start building a message. People have said, let's not be distracted by Epstein. Let's not be distracted by all these sideshows happening. Let's really home in on the economy, which is what people care about at the end of the day, and healthcare. And let's make that case instead of, let's not be the anti-Trump party all the time. Let's say what we are for. And so if Democrats can really put that message out there and say, here's what we stand for, here's our 5-point plan, but not put it in those terms, this is what we stand for. This is who we are. I think that they stand a really good chance of winning the House back and maybe coming close to winning the Senate.
And before I get to my final question, thank you, subscribers, for joining us. And thank you from the bottom of my heart to paid subscribers who have allowed this Substack to continue and allow me to bring great conversations like Amie. I hope some of you will consider flipping from a free subscription to a paid subscription to support independent journalism. My final question, I'm curious, and you're a Washington person. I mean, you've spent a lot of time there. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson pushed a bill through Congress to get money for the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts and renamed what was being in the works since Eisenhower to commemorate the deceased president, create a living memorial. And yesterday, the board of the Kennedy Center voted, even though it's a congressional issue, to rename it the Trump Kennedy Center. I'm curious. I mean, if you want to share your thoughts on it, that'd be great. But also, will this be a story like the East Wing? Will this be a kind of story that, for various reasons, resonates in a way that others don't?
I think so. You know what's interesting is when I have traveled the country this year, people want to talk to me about the East Wing. They want to talk to me about what's happening. You know, the wall that he's put up right now to talk about the presidents and how he's, hit Presidents Obama and Joe Biden on there. I think it's an issue that it's a sideshow, as some would put it, but it's actually a very good, strong issue to talk about, like why the presidency has fallen so far into the trenches, and how I think that is something that people can talk about in going into 2028. For example, a Bashir, if you will, can talk about how he wants to bring civility back, how it's gone too far. I mean, renaming the Kennedy Center is akin to renaming JFK Airport, or it's something that you don't do, and I think a lot of people are put off by it. And I think it is one of those issues that people will come back to and say, why did we spend so much time on this sort of thing when there's so many other things? There are reasons I voted for you, and this is not one of them.
Amie Parnes of the Hill, author, co-author of many great books on the presidential elections and more to come. Thanks for joining the Long View. We'll talk again soon.
Happy New Year, Julian.
Happy New Year. Bye bye.